What's up, everyone? Today, I want to talk about a topic that a lot of people mention but don't know a whole lot about. And this topic is CNS fatigue. Now, our CNS is our central nervous system. It is our brain and our spinal cord. And it houses two motor neurons that run from our brain to a particular muscle and creates a motor unit, or a particular set of muscle fibers and creates a motor unit. For this topic, we're not going to talk about the muscle. A nerve innervates a muscle, but you'll understand how nerves function enough. And this is important because if we know the mechanisms, we can go back to the drawing board and we can kind of infer what we need to do in order to better that mechanism or to overcome some sort of limit or barrier we have on that mechanism. So understanding the way that neurons communicate to each other and to muscles is going to give us a better idea of what CNS fatigue is and how we can recover from it better. So your brain sends a message to your upper motor neuron. Again, I said there's two, right? You have an upper motor neuron and a lower motor neuron. Your brain will send a message to your upper motor neuron, and what it does is it releases neurotransmitters into this gap between two neurons, and that receiving neuron has receptors for those neurotransmitters. Those neurotransmitters attach to the receptors, and this induces a electrical change in the cell. That electrical shift causes the electrical shift to continue to propagate down the cell, that one change, if it's large enough. So when we talk about a muscle firing, or when we talk about the CNS and the work it does when you do a heavy lift, we're talking about neurotransmitters and ions, or the cell's potential to uptake or have the ion channels necessary in order to propagate the message. Continue the message down the line until it gets to your muscle and your muscle contracts. This is all your CNS is. It's a communication system, electric and chemical, that send the message to your muscle and creates a physical response. So now that we know this, we can talk about CNS fatigue and why it might not exist as we think it does. Our CNS can't be completely fatigued, mostly because if it is, then we stop breathing, our heart stops beating, we're dead, right? If we were able to completely fatigue our CNS, we would be on the brink of death. So sure, you can fatigue some of your CNS, but what I want you to think more about is that you're fatiguing those specific motor neurons that pertain to that pattern. So when we lift heavy one day, we shouldn't go lift heavy in that same pattern another day, because there is fatigue that exists in that direct pattern from your brain to the same muscles that you're using again. But the mechanism of that fatigue comes from the fact that after those neurotransmitters are found in receptors, they're broken down. So we might have a lack of neurotransmitter. We might have a lack of receptor for that neurotransmitter. We may also have lack of ions. So if we can't or don't have the ions that it takes in order to create that electric potential or that big electric change that signals a propagation down the line, then we're probably fatigued. And when you do lift heavy, you do utilize all of that. And you will become fatigued in those motor neurons. And this will affect your performance the next day and even the day after that. But what we're here to talk about is how to recover from that. So it's no doubt that this happens. When we train, we exhaust our nervous system via using neurotransmitters and using ions. When we do this, our body will start to utilize them recognize that kind of stuff as waste. We'll get rid of it, and we try to replenish it. Our body will rebuild it to a level that we need it to, as long as we sleep enough and we get proper amounts of nutrients. especially your salts, your sodiums, your chlorides, your potassium, your calcium. All of these ions are very important when it comes to an electrical signal propagating down the neuron and heading to your muscle. So, the way we recover this mechanism is by sleeping and providing our body with the minor building blocks it needs in order to rebuild the neurotransmitters that were broken down, or to replenish the calcium, sodium, potassium, and chloride that has been utilized to create that electrical signal or the electrical change in the cell. So while yes, we can fatigue our CNS or parts of our nervous system, the way to recover it is to not just choose another pattern or just use some other pattern and exhaust our neurotransmitters and our ions in that manner. The answer is not a different movement pattern, okay? If the answer was a different movement pattern, we wouldn't feel the CNS fatigue of a squat on our deadlift day. Just changing up the movement pattern and testing the body in different ways is a great way to engage the nervous system, for sure. Proprioceptors, inhibitory muscles. But when we genuinely just talk about the excitatory signaling that it takes from our neurons to lift a heavy ass weight, it's going to be neurotransmitter degradation. It's going to be lack of receptors. It's going to be lack of ions in the system. It has nothing to do with moving in a different pattern and everything to do with lifestyle. And I'm sorry that might be the ugly truth for some of you, but your CNS isn't fatigued. Your brain isn't shutting down. Sleep more, eat more, and provide your body with the building blocks it needs to create more. And that is simple adaptation, my friends.